Good evening, everyone. We'll start proceedings by asking the Reverend Jim Corrigan from the Unitarian Meeting House.
My text tonight is from the book of Psalms, Psalm 1. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. It would be good to believe that all the work of this borough council will yield its fruit in season, and that all that you do will prosper. Reality is often messier than the ideals, though. We're unlikely to get everything right. But we must not lose sight of the ideals. And if we work in harmony with these, in harmony with each other, with nature, and with higher laws that govern our consciences and the moral universe, we will indeed be following the law of the Lord. And then we trust our efforts will prosper and will yield their fruit in season. We ask that it be so. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Please note that the monitoring officer, in consultation with the leader and myself, has granted permission for this meeting to be filmed and photographed by Mr. Ben Redfield. If anyone present, including members of the public, object to being filmed, would they please indicate to Mr. Redfield. Also, I will still remind everyone who has a mobile phone that this should be switched to each silent mode whilst the meeting is in progress. Thank you. Item 1. I've received apologies from Councillor Dedman, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Goldsmith, Councillor Cannon, Councillor LeGree, Councillor Pam Stewart, Councillor Powell, Councillor Crane, Councillor Cook, John Cook, Councillor Sensi. Are there any others? Agenda item 2. Minutes. May I sign these unconfirmed minutes of the council meeting held on the 30th of October 2013 as a correct record? Item 3, order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business printed on the agenda? Item 4, declaration of interest. Are there any councillors who wish to declare interest on any item of business on the agenda in addition to that. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. I would like to clear a little bit more peculiar interest in item 9, the area committee agenda for tonight.
Councillor Garden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the same reason under item 9, being the Suffolk County Council declare a local non-criminal interest.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Same.
Anyone else? Councillor Quinton. Very good. Item 5, Mayor's communication. The Mayor's communication has been circulated to all of you, but I should mention a few things. A long time ago, since the mayors and I, we were at a festive event, carol services, and as this is our first meeting of the year, may I wish you all the best for 2014. I've hosted the Civic Celebration of Communities event supported by the faith communities in Ipswich, and I'm pleased to say that the church was packed. People had to stand at the back, which was very gratifying. The Holocaust Memorial Day event took place on Monday at the University campus, Suffolk, and we visited the HMD exhibition also on display. I would like to thank all those who attended our charity events last weekend. I had a fantastic night of dancing at the Soul Night on Saturday, and our Burns supper on Sunday evening was also a great success. Thank you to everyone who attended and supported the charities. I would also remind you who they are, some of you who don't know. It's each the Daily Daily Trust and the Fresh Start New Beginning. And a couple of days for your diary. On Thursday, the 27th of February, at 7:30, is a charity quiz night in the Grand Hall. And on Saturday, the 22nd of March, is the Mayor's Charity Ball in the Town Hall. Please note that there are a few tables available for both the charity, the quiz, and the Mayor's Charity Ball. And we want to move rather quickly because they're almost come. Thank you. Item 6, questions. Can I please remind colleagues that supplementary questions must be related to the original question and not be preceded by a statement. Question 1 is the LDAR to Councillor Jones.
What are you doing to increase tourism revenue for the park?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a long list, but I will be selective. Obviously, marketing is very important in terms of tourism, and we're making greater use of digital channels and marketing campaigns, including proposals to deliver interactive digital devices in the TIC and IBC service outputs from this spring. As always, we aim to lever match funding from the private sector and the local enterprise partnership to enhance our offer and increase our promotion of Ipswich as a destination. We have an excellent TIC and Tourist Information Centre, and staff frequently attend travel trade shows where they have stalls in order to sell Ipswich to national and international organisations, and then face-to-face with coach companies and group travel organisations in order to encourage them to come to us. Here in Ipswich, they organise familiarisation events to bring accommodation and tourism providers and staff into the town so they better understand what we have to offer. And lastly, our TIC and our excellent events team promote our cultural offer and a huge and terrific program of events. We have Peaks Festival this weekend, for example, to anyone and everyone who likes it.
Would you consider taking both lets people know what things they can do in which where accommodations are available, where they can eat and drink, and what those costs are available, not places that are available. Would you also consider having a BCD to advertise the town, make group of staff, and having a website, considering 80% of the tourism revenue run by the internet?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Alger has missed the All About Ipswich website, which you can get to from the Ipswich Borough Council website. This is suburb.com website and the tripadvisor.co website. Information about all of those things that you mentioned are available there. If you go to the Tourist Information Centre, they will give you leaflets and brochures about anything you want to know fundamentally. And to be honest, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how he has missed doing that. I think proof of the pudding of the success of our marketing is that in the last 3 years, Premier and Travelodge have both opened new hotels, business and leisure uses, and our TIC staff have got data showing that we have new visitors to Ipswich because they're promoted via those two hotels websites. So, you know, I think there's plenty of stuff out there, and I think a visit to the TIC or to the All About Ipswich website would be educative for Mr. Alger.
Thank you. Question 2. Again, to Councillor Ellison.
In light of the rise of notice for its apartment communities and what items to repair to encourage citizens to explore the minimum council with interested full access to the Northern Council meetings by the use of any media they choose, including the webcast.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council meetings are open to the public, except when exempt items are under consideration. So anyone who is interested can attend and report on proceedings, including using social media. The last executive meeting of this council was filmed and placed on the internet by a local blogger, and if Mr. Alger hadn't realised, he turns to his right, you will see that this meeting is also being filmed.
First of all, obviously I've got to ask, is he filming in response to me asking this question 2 weeks ago? Is he filming in response to me submitting this question 2 weeks ago, or is he filming, are you allowing filming in response to guidelines by our officials? And also, would you consider moving council meetings to Endeavour House, where broadcasting facilities are available?
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't speak for why Mr. Redsel is filming this meeting. Perhaps Mr. Alger can ask him. When this administration took control of the council, we were very clear that we wanted to have Ipswich Borough Council meetings in Ipswich Borough Council property. And the council chamber of the town hall, in my view, is where Ipswich Borough Council meetings should occur.
Question 3. Councillor Terry. Councillor Jones.
In the latest edition of Angle, the article on economic development states that the team's core business cost was $600,000 last year, whilst generating funds and income of $650,000. Please put the portfolio holder justify these figures.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fair to say officers were not quite sure quite what was required here, so I'll do my best. The cost was made up of a mix of staff general expenditure and the Council's Jobs and Skills Fund. Income was received from sources such as the market and income associated with the Wayfinder project and the grants on other grants on their way through being used. The figures exclude matters associated with tourism, parking and transport. They are, of course, not inward investment income or figures which are much greater, but I would be happy to provide Councillor Terry with a written breakdown of the data in more detail if that would be helpful.
Supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, indeed, thank you. A breakdown would be very helpful. I'm surprised that I didn't actually understand what I meant. However, the figures that Councillor Jones has mentioned actually conflict with the figures provided by the Chief Exec to Chris Stewart. And what he was told was that the cost for a service for economic development was 710,000 and their income was 320.
Chair, I think that was actually a statement. I will have a little discussion with Mr. Williams to check what he's saying. And if Councillor Terry would like to email me for precise data, I'm very happy to provide it.
Thank you. Is Mr. Penny? No? We will have to give him a written reply to his question. Question 5. Councillor to Councillor Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The leader of the council confirmed at the ONS committee meeting on the 19th of December that £1 million will continue to be kept in the capital budget pending matched funding from a third party to reopen Broomhill Hall. Can the portfolio holder update councillors on progress?
Councillor Rudd.
Thank you. As you know, we have committed up to £1 million to support a viable plan for bringing the pool back into use, and have been working with the delivery partner Fusion Lifestyle to look at this. Regular communication with Fusion and between Fusion and IBC offices continues, and they are working with design partners, including those they've worked with on, for example, the Rockwell Lido bid, to prepare a heritage lottery fund bid for the application for the project. Fusion is revisiting its business plan to ensure it's sustainable, any redevelopment is sustainable, and provides for the long-term future. And I understand that they're due to go with their architects next month. So it says later this month, but I think it might be next month. So they're going to have a look.
Supplementary, Councillor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the portfolio holder believe that spending £1 million on a Lido, very likely to be used by very few, is a wise use of taxpayers' money?
Well, given it was your administration that first put the money there, Councillor Stroke, perhaps you might want to reflect on that. I think that the clue is in the answer I gave, which is about making sure that any redevelopment plan is sustainable for the long-term future. And whilst I personally love swimming in cold water and do so as regularly as I can, I do understand that that isn't for everybody. So sustainable use does mean providing other opportunities on any such site, and that's indeed what we're looking at. It could be used to a greater degree. But sustainability for the long-term future are the key words.
Question 6. Councillor Moles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could Councillor Moles tell me how the council is determining the type of houses it is doing? Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have regard to a number of factors, in fact, such as the demand, of course, which is based on the choice-based letting system that we operate. Also, of course, local consultation and technical considerations like planning and location. I would just add that whereby there is, in fact, considerable demand for all types of property, the greatest demand at the present time is for small accommodation.
Councillor Ross?
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you for the answer then. Could you tell me how many two-bedroom properties is Councillor Terry proposed to demolish?
Councillor Miles.
Mr Mayor, I suspect I know the properties that Councillor Ross is referring to, and if they are the town bungalows on Rushmere, the prefabbs, I would say, I can tell him, as he probably knows, that there are 142 in total. 127 of those are in the council's ownership and are rented.
Mr Mayor, a point of information if I make this personal statement. I have not suggested that the bungalows be demolished. What I have asked for is that there is a plan and a strategy for their ultimate replacement, simply because they are now 60 years old, and spending £600,000 to update them is very welcome, but that will only extend their life by a maximum of 10 years, and there needs to be a strategy for the future.
Do I answer?
Right.
Can I just say that the point, which is not a question of any sort, of course, the point that's just been made does not, is not in accord at all with some of the statements made by Councillor Terry, both in the past, when I say the past, last year, and this year.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, you cannot. I'm sorry.
That is not correct.
Councillor? Question 7, Councillor Connell. Councillor Elton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the planning application for the development of the St Clement's site has been withdrawn, would the administration consider the possibility of purchasing the site to develop it as a public open space or public park?
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am a little surprised by this question. The previous Conservative and Liberal Democrat administration, in which Councillor Carnell was deputy leader, established the principle of building housing on the St Clement's site. Indeed, Councillor Carnell's administration originally proposed building 500 houses on the site. It was only after a strong campaign by local Labour councillors that this was more than halved to 227. We do not know what the current plans of the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust are, following the withdrawal of their planning application before Christmas. Council officers are hoping to meet with them in the next few weeks to discuss their plans for the site. However, given that Councillor Carnell and his administration established the principle that this site has a value for more than 200 housing units, it is unlikely that the Trust would be willing to sell it at public open space value, which would realistically mean them giving it away for nothing. If the Trust were to propose that the site should become a public park, then I am sure that the Council would be open to discussing that possibility with them. However, this would of course put even more pressure on the Northern Fringe to deliver housing. What I can categorically say is that, contrary to what has been said in a recent Conservative newsletter, this Council is not planning and never has planned to turn the St Clement's site into, quote, a large council estate. That, Mr Mayor, is simply not true, just as it wasn't true when the Conservatives said that we wanted to build a council estate on the Ransom Sports and Social Club site. I can only assume that there's an election coming.
Supplementary, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Councillor Ellesmere was so enthusiastic to provide public open space for Vega residents at Kilmeadow, I thought that this was a great opportunity for him to do the same for residents of Ipswich. I'm very surprised that he's not going to take this opportunity. Does he not agree with me on that?
Councillor Ellesmere.
Mr Mayor, I do wish the Conservative Party in Ipswich would sort out exactly what their position is on this site. Councillor Carnell has supported 500 houses, he's supported 227 houses, and now he's supporting 0 houses on St Clement's. Other Conservative councillors and our Conservative MP are criticising the council for placing too many demands on the developers and not letting them build anything they want on St Clement's. At the same time, our MP is also criticising us for not placing enough demands on developers on the Northern Fringe. Can the Conservative councillors and the MP just sit down together work out exactly what you do want, and then we'll be more than happy to talk to you.
Question 8, Councillor Carnell. Councillor Moles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as the council's housing service is concerned, does Councillor Moles subscribe to the claim that Ipswich Borough Council is a listening council that takes adequate account of the views of those affected by its decisions?
Mr. Mayor, I do indeed subscribe to that.
Supplementary, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I wonder then if Councillor Moles would explain to us why he did not listen to the 84 petitioners who complained about his plans to link together 2 council houses for a large family at a cost that is now almost 3 times that which was originally estimated.
Councillor Moles.
Mr. Mayor, I have no intention whatsoever of discussing an individual case such as this at a full council meeting in public. I'm disappointed that it's been raised in this fashion, and it does surprise me a bit. It didn't surprise me when the national newspaper splashed this on the front page, because this kind of thing is extremely rare. But as I said, it does disappoint me, and it's quite demoralising, I think, for other councillors when this kind of thing is raised in public here. But we followed the entire procedures correctly, but as I say, details of anything, an individual instance like this, that shouldn't be aired in public here.
Item 9, question 9. Mr. Tosley, the Councillor Jones. See that? Question 10. Mr. Tosley.
Mr. Mayor and Councillor, my question is about drainage. Now that the whole of the Ipswich Northern Fringe development may be required earlier with simultaneous starts, can we be assured that the proposed drainage tunnel to Cliff Key is completed before any works commence, especially in view of the fact that Tottenham and Westerfield sewage work already operate at level capacity?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Clean Water are responsible for the management of foul sewage generated from all development in Ipswich. They've been formally consulted at the issues and options stage of the SPD and Fringe, and have indicated no objections in principle to the proposed development of the Northern Fringe area. They advise that the development is within the catchment of Cliff Key Sewage Treatment Works, which has the capacity to treat the flows from the whole of the Northern Fringe development. I checked with our senior drainage engineer, who has extensive and long-standing local knowledge in Ipswich, and he is unaware of any new proposal for the new drainage tunnel dimension in your question.
Supplementary proposal? Thank you. Question 10. Mr. Jones, Mr. J. Jones. The Councillor Jones. Mr. Jones? We'll give him a written answer to both his questions. Councillor Lockington, Councillor. Question 12, Councillor Lockington. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How many dwellings has been given planning permission within the waterfront during the last 4 years, and how many of them is either under construction or completed?
Councillor Jones.
From the 1st of April 2009 to the 31st of March 2013, 573 dwellings were granted planning permission in the waterfront area. At the 1st of April 2013, 84 dwellings were under construction and 15 completed. Clearly since then, permission numbers are low, but development is at least significantly advanced at Stoke Quay for 386 units.
Supplementary?
Mr. Mayor, linking to the waterfront question, what are the latest news on the stored buildings like Downs East and the one what could be called a bottle place or bookshelf or something like that? What is the latest news on them?
Chair, there's nothing we'd like better than to see these stalled projects coming to use, get completed, but there are significant problems with companies in administration, with NAMA, the Irish organisation, and with multiple ownerships of the sites. But the council has been talking to people, and we will see them. I'm sure we will see them develop in such a spectacular setting at some time. But I have not got any great news for Councillor Lockington at this moment.
Sorry. Councillor Lockington again. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Within the service level agreement between Suffolk County Council and Ipswich Borough Council about the green workers in Ipswich, is there anything about how the green workers should be maintained apart from the cutting of the grass?
Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid it is just cutting the grass that is, of course, within the service level agreement. Since the introduction of this agreement, the Borough Council has been contracted to provide 3 cuts per year of pine verges in order to allow visibility and to maintain safety. And these take place between May and October. Suffolk County Council remains responsible for any other maintenance that may be required on verges, although they are making clear that this is something which is exceptional times.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Can I ask Councillor Smart whether he will look into who is actually responsible when someone has been building on their property and they've had lots of noise coming and going, and should we not, as a Borough Council, keep an eye on that and actually write to this individual to ask them to install the workers to the way they should be looking after they finish building work?
Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all of us will be concerned about any damage to the public realm arising out of building works. But as far as maintenance of the verges are concerned, if there is evidence that it is being caused by a third party's activity, it will be up to the County Council to seek to make a claim against that third party. It is not something that the Borough Council can get involved in. I am aware that Councillor Lockington serves as a member of Suffolk County Council, and she may well be in a better position to ask a question like that to someone at the County Council rather than to ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Ellesmere.
Mr. Mayor, before I ask my question, I think it would be appropriate for me to ask if you would extend the time available for questions. This is running late.
Yes.
Thank you. At the North West Area Committee last night, we did so much good work, I could almost claim to have arrived hot foot from that meeting, we were so late. My question, I know, may be thought to be part of a matter which is on the agenda later on, but I keep hearing rumours that area committee budgets are at least being looked at, if not actually at risk.
So I would like to be reassured the actions of area committees only represent work that would otherwise be done by other parts of the council, as we've been told recently, and would the leader of the council intend to ensure that any budgetary cuts to area committees are made good elsewhere?
Councillor Edson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure what statement or assurance that Councillor Stewart was referring to there. However, all councillors should be under no illusion about the severity of cuts that the government is imposing on this and all councillors. Over the next 2 years, our funding will be cut by 27%, or £2.5 million a year. This administration is committed to doing all it can to protect frontline services. However, given the scale of government cuts, it is unrealistic to imagine that savings in one council service area will automatically be made up for by increases in others. All service areas are having to make savings.
Supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Does this mean that the activities of the area committees are not to be regarded as frontline services?
Councillor Edson.
Councillor Stewart will be aware that the cross-party communities working group recommended that there should be a reduction in area committee budgets. We will, of course, take that into account in the budget we publish next week.
Question 15. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What is the total estimated sum that the council will receive in the new home bonus from the 3,500 houses that are proposed to be built on the northern Peterborough?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. If the current new homes bonus scheme is still operating throughout the period that homes are built on the Ipswich Northern Fringe area, then the local councils would receive, at today's prices, about £1,600 per property built each year for 6 years. This could amount to over 30 million in total over a period of well in excess of a decade. According to the current rules, the Borough Council will receive 80% of any amount and the County Council 20%. A further amount would be payable for each affordable home completed within that development. It should be noted, however, that the new homes bonus is not specific to the Northern Fringe proposal and applies to any home completed on any site within the borough.
Supplementary, Mr. Wolf.
Mayor, the government's recommendation is that the revenue from the new homes bonus should in the main be used to benefit the community most affected by the housing growth. What are the plans for the spending of this new homes bonus, and will it be extended to the residents of Westerfield affected by this development?
Chair, no decision has been made about the spending of some of money, which we have not got yet. And we would have to take a view of what we did with that sum of money when we had actually got it. But it would follow whatever protocol was set down, and I would doubt that it would support council services in a proper manner.
Question 16. Yes. Mrs. Chambers. To Councillor Jones.
Will all the trees which tree vegetation borders on them be protected by the proposed development on Red House Farm Park at the moment?
The short answer, Mrs. Chambers, is yes. Thank you.
Supplementary.
What green buffer will be guaranteed to protect us next to Red House Farm, the important heritage 17th century park site, from the highest proposed density on the whole site of 43 acres per hectare, which will resemble an ideal road development?
What Mrs. Chambers describes, Mr. Mayor, is out to consultation at this moment. So I hope very much Mrs. Chambers will make her views known, will state what she objects to and what she supports, and I can guarantee that that will be taken into account when we come to draw up the final SPD. But the tree she mentioned in her original question will certainly be protected.
Question 17, Mr. Penman, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. It concerns proposed northern fringe development. Land under consideration for development on the northern fringe is heavy clay, and of which there are a number of natural springs which make it self-irrigating valuable agricultural land. Our council officers confident that the measures they propose will be sufficient to drain this area if the development goes ahead, and will not be left in a situation where Westfield clay and digging will be more prone to flooding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Development, we are assured, will not increase peak surface runoff from the site. It is proposed that the site will be drained via sustainable drainage systems which will direct controlled flows northwards to a tributary of the River Gipping and not into the centre of Ipswich.
Supplementary?
Supplementary question, I think the gentleman here asked a similar one, about foul water and sewage on the northern fringe. They developed Hillsborough, which is 3,500 dwellings plus. I'd like to know the plans for those matters of handling, transporting and processing the foul waste and sewage to do the effects of the likely disruptions to traffic in an already bridge to Rockland
Chair, I'm not sure I can give a precise answer to that question. However, before when any application is put forward for any development on the northern fringe, a viable and detailed proposal will need to be submitted, and Anglian Water will again be consulted on each and every one of those, and we will go along with their expert advice, and developers will have to follow that.
Thank you. That concludes this agenda item. Item 7. Tax base. The 2014-15 Council Code.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an annual report presented at this time of the year every January. By way of explanation, the council tax base is simply the number by which we have to divide council's council tax requirement by to obtain the land council tax charge. As such, it is an important first step in setting the council's budget for the coming year. Local Government Finance Act 1992, together with the local authorities' calculation of the council tax base, England Regulations 2012, set out the procedures for calculating the tax base. A tax base for the coming financial year has to be determined by billing authorities such as this council and notified to precepting authorities, in our case the Suffolk County Council and Suffolk Constabulary, by the 31st of January 2014. This is only the second time that the tax base calculation has included the impact of the local council tax support scheme, which was introduced from April 2013. So unlike last year, the table in paragraph 2.4 does provide a like-for-like comparison. The council tax base is driven by factors which include house building, revaluation, discounts, council tax support and the collection rate. Mr. Mayor, the most significant change this year is in the forecast collection rate. If you go back 2 years to 2012-2013, we have assumed a collection rate of 98.75%. This was reduced to 97.25% last year because of the anticipated impact of the council tax support localisation arrangements, where many less well-off 10 residents of Ipswich have to pay council tax for the first time. In fact, though, Mr Mayor, due to the hard work of the revenues team under Andrew Wilcott, the impact of council tax localisation on the collection rate has not been as bad as first feared. This means that we are now able to revise our forecast collection rate upwards again to 98%, halfway to where it was 2 years ago. So, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation 6.1. In accordance with this report, the local authority calculation of council tax base, England Regulations 2012, the amount calculated by Ipswich Borough Council as its council tax base for the financial year 2014-15 is £35,265.
Tracy next.
Yeah, second, this report, I think that hands on.
All I want to say is that this is purely the annual report, and having been in council since '99, I've seen many of these reports that come every year. One thing that always amazes me is to look at the housing numbers. And if you look at the banding and go back years, you will find that the enrollment has been about the same percentage in each band. It hasn't moved year by year. You know, I don't know what it would ever do to us if there is the banding of the council tax, whether that would make any big difference. But certainly the percentage of the housing, and clearly you can see that Ipswich has a lot of houses in band A, B and C houses, and I'm sure that compare differently to the districts outside. But it is simply just a matter of fact what we have here, and that's what we agree on.
Anyone else please to speak on the side? Yes, I will.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to respond to Councillor Lockwood's remarks, there is a slight shift actually in the distribution of houses across bands. I observed that if you look at the change over the last 2 years, there has been a 0.3% increase in the number of properties in bands A and B. Meanwhile, a 5.5% increase in the top bands G and H. So it is evolving and changing a little over time, but just again, I'd like to move the recommendations.
All those in favour? That's carried. Item 8, approval of the local business rent scheme.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This again is an annual report we now present every January. NNDR, or National Non-Domestic Rates, are known by most people as business rates. Business rate localisation legislation was only introduced from April 2013, but with savage cuts to revenue support grant, which is down by almost a half over 2 years, business rates are emerging as one of our most valuable income streams. Next year, our retained business rates will total almost £4 million. So it's very important then, Mr Mayor, to get this right. The Council does deserve an explanation for why the NNDR1 form, also known as Appendix 1, has not been circulated prior to this meeting, as promised. Unfortunately, the timeline for completing the NNDR1 form was unreasonably short this year. The form is a little bit of a misnomer in its own right. It's a complicated spreadsheet with many formulae. It was first circulated by EPLOG on the 17th of January. 2 revisions followed, and that corrected a number of errors and problems with the spreadsheet, updated guidance notes, and so on. Then on Monday lunchtime, Mr. Mayor, we received another email from DPLOG about a fourth version of the spreadsheet. I'll read you some edited highlights from that email, Mr. Mayor, if you'll indulge me for a moment. Please find attached the revised version of the NNTR1. We're sorry that this is another version of the form, and are very aware that these late changes are causing a lot of problems and extra work for you. The regulations applicable for completion of the NNDR1 form say that it should be returned to us by Friday, 31st of January, so we are unable to change this date. However, please email us if you feel that you'll be unable to return the form before that date. If you have emailed us a query, we are dealing with them and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Our staff, Mr. Mayor, have fought valiantly with the spreadsheet and they have been trying to complete it. It is at a fairly advanced stage, but they did not feel able to complete it 100% and quality check it to the level that we would want and expect for something that has a value of £4 million prior to tonight's meeting. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, I'm just sorry that we will have to table some amended recommendations, and this is obviously just circulate that. I'll pause for a moment and then explain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope everyone's got sight of that. It's fairly straightforward. The new recommendations effectively ask Council to 13.1 authorise the Section 151 officer to approve the NNDR1 form in consultation with the portfolio holder for resources, and 13.2 authorise the Section 151 officer to sign and send the approved NNDR1 form to DPLOG by Friday, the 31st of January.
That's why I'm seconding this. Again, not much to add. Just to reiterate the outrage that the government that says it plans to cut red tape has left something so late, something so important as income for local councils, and also to thank the officers for working so hard to get it done.
As this is one of those things that government wishes on us without considering what's happening at the other end of the line, I can understand why we have difficulties, but it seems to me that we could have received updates regularly, almost daily perhaps, to explain what was going on. I still find it difficult to make sense of a statement on page 17, for instance. It says exempt from empty property relief. Now, does that mean that there will be empty property relief, or does it mean that empty buildings, new buildings, are different from existing buildings? If we are, A, not to be given information about the state of play as we go along, and we have sentences in the paper which are difficult to interpret, let's put it as charitably as that, it makes it very difficult to decide where we stand. We haven't got much to say, we haven't got much that we can do about this, but simply having clear information regularly supplied would at least enable us to come to the meeting with some idea of what we want to say.
Thank you. All I would like to ask is that when this spreadsheet and paper is ready, is there any way that it could be made a copy available to councillors who they want to look at it? Because it might be interesting for us all to go and look at this to see how complicated it actually is and what it looks like when it's finally finished.
Councillor Hillsman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As outlined by Councillor Cook, I think this is, just an example of shocking incompetence by ministers in DCLG. I was party to a letter that was sent by all the leaders of Suffolk districts to Brandon Lewis last week, criticising him for sending a massive tome on reintroducing weekly bin collections. There is no area in Suffolk that wishes to introduce weekly bin collections. I have to say, I was not the ringleader in that letter. Some of the comments from some of my fellow Conservative district and borough leaders I could not repeat in this chamber. But can Councillor Cook confirm in his summing up that the late arrival of the NMDR form is not the only example of incompetence by Eric Pickle's department? For instance, can he confirm that even though we are due to publish our budget proposals early next week, we still have not received the final details of what the council tax referendum threshold will be this year?
Anyone else? Councillor Cook, to that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, to Councillor Stewart's point, I'm very sorry that he feels he hasn't been kept informed about this. I do have here, Mr. Mayor, an email from Mr. John Hudson, who is the Council Section 151 officer. This was sent on the 27th of January to Councillor Ellesmere, myself, Councillor Chris Stewart, Councillor Andrew Cann, and CC, the Chief Executive, explaining exactly the status of the NMDR1 form. And surely there was every opportunity for Councillor Stewart, if he had questions, concerns or other issues that you wanted to raise, to either respond to that email, telephone Mr. Hudson, or drop into the council offices to discuss it. Sorry that he didn't take that opportunity. I do very much regret, Mr. Mayor, that we are in this situation. I don't think there's anything that any of us, this authority, councillors or officers alike, could do to avoid this. I don't quite know what the position of councils that maybe had their full council meeting last week or the week before is now. Will they have an extraordinary meeting to revise it, update it? Who knows? It is a shambolic matter, and as Councillor Ellesmere said, it is not an isolated incident. We're not sure even now what the referendum threshold will be for council tax increases. Will it be 2%, as previously said? Will it be 1.5% as speculated? Will it be some other figure? We just don't know, Mr. Mayor. But I would like to move again the recommended, or the amended recommendations on this report, 13.1 and 13.2.
All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 9. Area committees, no initiative in terms of dedicated parks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Area committees have got off to a successful start. Successful projects funded from MAP to support local business growth in the North East to co-funding an overhaul of the street scene on Upper Orwell Street in the central area. We've had great public engagement from 328 residents doing a community walkabout in the North West to a crowd of rooms debating the merits, or perhaps otherwise, of wind turbines in the South West. We've got higher attendance than the old area forums, thousands of pounds attracted from external funders, and decision-making taken closer to the people in every corner of Ipswich. But as this paper shows, there is more that we can do, and that's what this paper is all about. More powers. Area committees and local democracy are at their strongest when they're taking decisions. So that's why in the paper we propose to devolve decision-making on the design and layout of projects funded through Section 106 of the Community Infrastructure Levy, and further powers to devolve to area committees, so they can be stronger. More partnership, co-opting county councillors onto area committees as non-voting members, helping to unlock joint funding for projects where the responsibilities of councillors on different authorities coincide. For example, perhaps tackling antisocial behaviour on our estates while simultaneously improving child social care, or more people using our borough's parks and leisure facilities at the same time as improving public health. This, at the same time, is involving county councils to make our area committees a real one-stop shop for local people wanting to know what's going on in their area and how they can contribute. And this paper proposes more action between meetings. Area committees are not and have never been just about their meetings. It's what happens in those meetings, and perhaps more importantly, what happens between them, that counts. So this paper creates a new Making a Difference budget. Up to 10% of the area committee's annual budget to be spent on ward initiatives with the agreement of all 3 ward councillors, without having to wait weeks for the next area committee meeting. More powers, more partnership, and faster acting, building on the success of area committee meetings to take the decision making even closer to the people of Ipswich. I'd like to move the recommendations 14.1 and 14.2.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you. As my colleague has said, we're really just starting to scratch the surface of what area committee is going to do. We've had some great success stories along the way, but these amendments will allow us so much more to release the potential of these area committees and allow us to be more proactive rather than just reactive, which is why I happily second this motion.
Councillor, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the area committees have now been running for 2 years, I think it would be very useful for the councillors to receive details of attendance of the public at these meetings. It would also be useful for the preceding 2 years of area forms for comparison. And also, it's a very small point, but on page 31 at the top, northwest area, northeast, it's a typo. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have looked at the committee paper here, and I think, yes, taking decisions close to people is certainly the right thing to do. We still have some reservations about how it's working out. Like the previous councillor who spoke, it is concerned. Yes, they're good attendance when there is a big subject on, but if it's not anything specific on the agenda, there hasn't always been that many residents there. If you look around, you sometimes see that it's officers and other people who come to speak at the committee. One of the things I was looking at was in 6.6, where it says that to take executive function decisions in relation to any works or services to be provided in its area out of its budget. And I checked that was clearly meant that is the area committee's budget. And if we want to have like new play equipment and so on, that clearly will have to come for that budget. So I think it will be really interesting to see if the budget is going to be proposed to be smaller. As we know, when you start in detail, you don't get very much play equipment and things like that for your money. So I think for us it will be, yes, we have to wait and see before we can pass an adjustment. But I think it will be important to keep an eye on how many of us actually turn up to the meeting. Thank you.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. I was just somewhat surprised. If we're going to allow 3 councillors to agree modest proposals and get things done more directly, I think we're inventing locality budgets by the back door. We are concerned in this group about the lack of consistency. We have reservations about the details of how these things function. I personally think that the Northwest is a model of area committee, but I know that my colleagues are constantly saying there is X and Y that could be improved in other areas. And while we are giving area committees more and more things to do, more and more competencies, we are not addressing the mechanics of it. And having just discovered in response to my question that these are not really to be regarded as frontline services, I wonder whether we can continue to be so enthusiastic. Are we going to be able to do all the wonderful things, for instance, that the North West Area Committee did yesterday? it's not easy to sustain people's interest if these kinds of questions are lurking in the background all the time. What we need are clarification, clear proposals for getting things done, and a reduction in the delays that still occur. And I'm not sure that even these backdoor locality budgets will address that question. And we will vote against this particular proposal as it stands.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say a few words about council involvement in area committees. Over the past couple of years, councillors of all parties have shown quite a very high level of commitment to Ipswich Borough Council's area committees. But of course, before that, area forums, and I think it is worth noting that what is in this report is at least partly in recognition of the contribution they have made. It would be remiss of me not to remark on the corporate commitment of Suffolk County Council to area committees. In fact, the lack of corporate commitment. Those who've been here long enough will recall that when the area forums were introduced, Suffolk County Council chipped into the cost of employing the community development officers that were so important to getting the area forums off the ground, and now, in a somewhat different role, keeping the area committees functioning. I think if any of our colleagues who are also on the county council are listening, perhaps they would go back to their council and say, look, we really ought to be doing better. We've got Ipswich Borough Council welcoming us into their area committees. Can't we show a little bit more support? I'm not suggesting money, but some resources, indeed a willingness to attend meetings on the part of their officers and councillors would help. When there's something on there that we want to talk about, rather than just something that they want to talk about. Anyway, just to reiterate the point I made, at a personal, at an individual level, I commend the commitment of Suffolk County Councils to area committees. At a corporate level, I bemoan the level of commitment of Suffolk County Council. Thank you.
Councillor Ross. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few Councillor Leader did mention, thankfully, our residents map and our trainers maps for the Woodbridge Road area. He also mentioned working on parks. The thing about both these issues, they were resident-led. Residents came to us, and we then used the resources of the council to enable a map that's going to help promote shopping in the local Woodbridge Road area. In the Cherry Lane recreation ground, it also enabled the county councillors to actually put money into the project, and also then to gain match funding from landfill. So we actually ended up with a park now 85,000 in June, Mr. Mayor, just remind you, are coming to open in March. Also, we had residents come again about closing a part of a road which was being used for rat run. Again, we enabled this to happen. We discussed it. We had a number of meetings. They kept pressure on us by attending, and that happened. I'm afraid now, of course, that is now a Suffolk County Council action, and I don't know how residents would get Suffolk County Council to do that, because there is obviously no area committee for them to go to. They'd probably just have to name their county councillor, and he could go and fill a commons form in on Trouble Ipswich over in Tarrant Park Shopping Centre and put a stamp on it. We've also had now the youth of North East coming to ask us for money towards an edible allotment project. Excellent. Councillor Lockington mentions numbers and people turning up. Well, I think it's on the onus on all of us to try and get numbers to increase. And I know when we want to leave that, the Labour Party, we mentioned the area committees, we want residents to come and see how they work. I received a Conservative leaflet the other day, no mention of area committees, though it did mention that we'd spent some money on the park. And when the Liberals give their leaflets out beyond Constable Road, maybe they can put area committees on that as well. But I would just say, church magazines we've been advertising ours will take adverts anyway. It's funny though, when you speak to Conservatives at the meetings, they're all for area committees, and I must admit the participation and the work that's been carried out by the Conservative Council North East has been very, very helpful to make the committees a success. But then it comes to a public meeting like this or scrutiny, they're all suddenly against them. Where do they stand? Thank you.
Thank you. Just two observations. The South West Area Committee, my own observation is that attendance has been better at area committees than it was at forums. I don't think it's always the big ticket items. At a recent meeting, we discussed the allotment strategy, which turned out to be the most engaging and vibrant discussion we've had for a long while, not least because one of the wind turbine people turned out to be a very keen allotmenteer as well. And actually, everybody said at the end what an interesting and useful discussion it was. So it isn't always the issues that you might think, because it's led by the people who come along who want to talk about things. Councillor Stewart worried from his group about consistency, or perhaps if you had more councillors representing a wider spread across the town, you get to know rather than filling just one table in the corner there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'd just like to comment on what Councillor Rawlinson said, and very much support what Councillor Rawlinson said. I think the County Council does have an agenda of engaging with communities. Unfortunately, it appears to be almost entirely based on engaging with parish councils and, by extension, town councils. And we have attempted to point out to them on numerous occasions that the area, each of the area committees represents an area, well, in fact, South West is even more, but the other area committees represent an area with a population greater than Felixstowe and all the Trinities put together, and that really they do need to engage with our area committees in the same way that they would engage with, for instance, Bury Town Council, or indeed any of the other larger town councils. If and when they do so, I am sure that we will get a better public buy-in to the county council services as we have done with the borough council services.
Councillor Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My position has always been here that I would prefer councillors to have locality budgets. But as that isn't going to happen in the present time, my position is to try and improve area committees and make them work as efficiently as possible. Against that background, I would like to ask Councillor Leader, and perhaps he can clarify this position for me. I noticed the Make a Difference budget. It does seem to me that while I appreciate the principle is probably to get things done, small things done quickly, it does seem to me that it's a rather bureaucratic procedure, because as I read it, the head of service has to consult every councillor in the area. That's the way I read it. So in the North East, if I put in a bid, for example, all other 8 councillors would be asked for a view. I think that's the way the Constitution here is written. And I would like to ask him for his clarification on that point, because I do think that sort of unnecessary bureaucracy should be avoided. Personally, I think it would be better if each councillor given a small locality budget, but I appreciate the administration won't like that. If I may also make the point about the county council, Mr. Mayor, I think there are 11 Labour county councillors representing Ipswich. Well, I suggest they get on and pick up the points they've made tonight and try and improve the situation. There should be enough of them to do so. And finally, in my spirit of being helpful tonight, I just wonder whether there should be a third recommendation approving the closure of the Ravenswood Steering Group and the transfer of its funds to the South East Area Committee. I'm very happy to support that, but I do think that it probably ought to be a recommendation rather than just left at the end.
Anyone else want to speak on this? No? Can you give us a view on what the Council of
Yes, the deletion of the reference to the Ravenswood Steering Committee would be a constitution amendment that would require... Yes, I can confirm that the formal deletion of the reference to the Ravenswood Steering Committee would be an amendment to be approved by Council. There will be a third report scheduling some amendments to the Constitution in due course as part of the Constitution Working Group arrangements. It will be picked up then.
Mr. Levy, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and be brief to respond to all the points raised. First of all, on attendance at area committees, I think it's a really valid point of concern, and I'm pleased to report that the attendance for both years we've had area committees eclipses the attendance for the 2 years preceding when we had area forums. So I think things are going in the right direction, but as Councillor Ross rightly says, we need to do everything we possibly can, church magazines, we're tweeting the Central Area Committee now, to try and drive more attendances from different groups of society to the area committees. Councillor Young, thank you for pointing out the fact that we seem to have radically tried to swap the North East and the North West area of Ipswich. That's an error in the report. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Councillor Lockington, I do understand that, yes, we always want to make our money go further, and that's why I think this report places a real emphasis on partnership working both with the County Council but also with other agencies, and that's why, as part of this package of commissions, all area committees will be getting a list of other statutory agencies and private organisations that might be able to match some of the area committees, so we can all make our money go a bit further. I'm glad Councillor Stewart's enjoying the North West Area Committee, even if he is there until 10:30 at night. Sounds like a good meeting. Councillor Rawlinson, I'd very much like to echo your points about county councillors from all parties who take a really proactive role and really keen to engage in area committees. And I agree with Councillor Rawlinson and Councillor Martin. It's a shame that's not reflected on the County Council. And finally, Councillor Carnell, thank you for your efforts to be helpful. I really appreciate it. I'd just like to clarify that under 6.13, it does say that a request submitted by all 3 ward councillors, and therefore you wouldn't be going through a bureaucratic process. I realise you'd like each council to have a county budget, but I'm afraid that's not on the agenda. Hopefully, if you're making a difference, budget to good use. I'd like to move the recommendation of this amendment.
All those in favour? Those against? Abstention? That's carried. Gender item 10. Council house rent increase. 2014. Council Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, they're arriving at the proposed rent increase for 2014-15. We've obviously had a regard to the financial arrangements the Housing Revenue Council, which has been in effect now for 2 years, and also the implications of any financial fluctuations and other uncertainties, such as benefit changes, etc. The housing account, as I think people know now, is self-financing, and we are required to ensure that the account balances each year without contribution from government or from council tax. We also have regard to the government's rent restructuring formula to assess the government guideline rent increase, which, as spelled out in the report, is based on the September Retail Price Index, plus a certain percentage, in this case 0.5%, plus £2 a week. For Ipswich, this works out, as it says in the report, 5.5%, an average of £4.40 a week across all our houses. And this is the figure shown in the recommendation of paragraph 13. This increase will meet our commitments to maintaining, improving and investing in our housing stock as provided in the Housing Business Plan agreed by the Council initially in 2012 and of course last year as well. The report also details in the appendices service charges for sheltered housing and proposed increases for those, and council garages and hard stands with proposed increases of 3.7% for the latter. That's also included in paragraph 13. Mr. Mayor, no time is a good time for rents to rise any more than any other costs. However, the proposed rents applicable from April this year do represent good value, as any comparisons will show. I move the recommendation as set out in the report with the recommendation at para 30. Thank you.
Councillor Moura, to second.
I would like to second the report and reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 17th of January this year, Ed Miliband, the leader of the Labour Party, stated in a speech to the University of London that what he calls the cost of living crisis is still the biggest challenge of our country faces, despite the economic recovery, and those are his words, not mine. He claimed that costs outstrip income and that the average worker is £800 a year worse off than in 2010. So is there a cost of living or a crisis or not? In Ipswich, there evidently isn't. Why? Because Ipswich Labour administration has decided on a third successive increase in council house rents, now set to rise by a further 5.5% from this April, adding a total of £600 to the average rent since they took control in Ipswich 3 years ago. And of course that's without the increases in council tax. The report says this is in line with government policy, but Labour ignore other policies, such as not increasing council tax. In paragraph 2.2, the report states that the formula rent is based on a combination of individual property values and average earnings in each area. Since neither have increased in Ipswich during the last year, there is no justification for any rental increase. Another spurious reason is that the money is needed to pay for more council housing, but the government has enabled local authorities to borrow in order to fund more council house building. However, if the Labour administration in Ipswich didn't ignore government planning guidelines in the National Planning Policy Framework, which clearly state that Section 106 demands must not prevent development, then private developers will already be providing additional housing, both private and affordable, well beyond the 50 per annum in the council's plans. Only 700 new homes have been built in the last 3 years, compared with the council's aspiration for 700 per annum. This report is Labour's worst hypocrisy, not only because it impacts on the thousands of hard-working council tenants, but also on sheltered housing residents, where warden services have been reduced. No cynically, however, it will also impact on the national deficit built up by the previous Labour government, because it will increase the housing benefit bill for those people who are unable to pay their own rent. Some tenants are already in arrears, and this further rent increase can only exacerbate their problems. I repeat, there is no justification for any rent increase, and we will not be supporting this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to like the previous speaker, I was surprised to see how high it was, given that we hear so much talk about the cost of living. It is clear that when you look back over the last 3 years, I think I get into 15.6% if the rent has risen by. So I personally would have liked to have seen a far lower increase this year, so that residents don't have to pay as much rent. And it is right that it clearly adds to the bill if people can't pay their rent and they have to be subsidised. So I don't want to support this here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some facts. The Conservative and Liberal Democrat government have set this guideline rent increase level. If they didn't think that was the increase council should apply, then why set it? The guideline formula is going to change next year to a lower figure. We will follow it. If the government had wanted to introduce that lower increase this year, they could have done so. We would have followed it. Most councils that we are aware of, Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat, are also increasing their rents in line with the government guideline increase. In fact, Conservative-controlled Mid-Suffolk and Vapour are considering an alternative option with even higher increases of 6.7% and 8% respectively. In the last year of the Conservative and Liberal Democrat administration in Ipswich, they increased rents by 6.4%. When the bedroom tax was introduced, which added up to £24 a week to rents of the very poorest people in Ipswich. Conservative and Liberal Democrat councillors didn't oppose it, they applauded it. So in summary, Mr Mayor, we have a guideline increase that is set by a Conservative and Liberal Democrat government, that is being followed by Conservative and Liberal Democrat councils across the land, that is lower than the last increase that the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats imposed in Ipswich, and that is 6 times lower than the bedroom tax which Conservative and Liberal Democrat councillors support. Given all that, Mr Mayor, do I believe that if the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats were running this council, that the rent increase would have been any lower this year? No, Mr Mayor, I do not, and neither does anybody else.
Councillor Paul.
We're often hearing in this chamber about consultation and how much consultation there should be. I would question whether simply asking the housing working group about council rent increases is adequate consultation.
Councillor Scott.
I find it disconcerting that when the Conservative group and the Liberal Democrat groups are prepared to question the basis on which this increase has been calculated, the Labour seem quite happy to follow it and to just simply fall into line and not try and do something to mitigate it. No business would retain the confidence of its stakeholders if, looking at its business plan 23 years ahead, it could see a deficit coming and does not run its affairs in the meantime to mitigate that deficit. What we do isn't supposed to produce profit, but at least it ought to be more consistent. I wonder, really, whether Labour are simply exploiting a difficult situation at a time when inflation is going down. It's now about 2%. When the Governor of the Bank of England said to the world's press this morning, if the rest of Europe could get their economy to work as well as ours would be doing even better. If we as a nation can go the right way by thinking for ourselves, I'm sure if the Labour Party in this administration were prepared to think for themselves, they could find ways of making life better for the people of Ipswich who have to face this increase.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must confess my surprise at Councillor Ellesmere's logic. Because certain Conservative councils are putting up council rents, Ipswich should do likewise. All I can say to him is last year many Conservative councils did not put up council tax. Didn't stop Ipswich Borough putting up its council tax. But, Mr Mayor, the economy is now in a state of recovery. We have an inflation rate of 2%, growth estimated this year of 2.4%. We have low mortgage rates, unemployment going down, and we've had 2.7 million low-paid people taken out of income tax. So the economy is recovering, but that recovery is taking time to filter through to individual households and families. Many families are still hard-pressed and are still finding it hard to make ends meet. So against a background like that, I think it's important that the council should not be trying to increase their outgoings by as much as a 5.5% increase in council tax. Quite frankly, Mr Mayor, this proposal for a 5.5% increase just illustrates the hypocrisy of the Labour administration. I'll give you 3 reasons. The first one, in his weekly rantings in the Ipswich Star, Councillor Ellesmere has attacked Greater Anglia for putting up train fares. What did Greater Anglia do? They put up the annual season ticket from Ipswich to London by 2.7%, 0.7% above inflation. What is Councillor Mole suggesting? Putting up council rents by 5.5%, nearly 3 times inflation, and yet Councillor Ellesmere, as he said, is very, very happy to support it. Secondly, we've had the point about government guidelines. They are exactly what they say, guidelines. They don't have to be followed to the letter by the administration. And in fact, in 2012, the administration ignored the guidelines. So that again is just a subterfuge. And thirdly, Mr. Mayor, we have Councillor Bowles, who says quite openly, well, it doesn't matter if council rents go up, because 2/3 of council tenants are on benefits, and we'll just pass on the cost to the ratepayer, to the taxpayer. Let the taxpayer pick up the bill. No wonder Labour are regarded as the party of welfare. What thought do they give to the hard-working council tenant who gets up every morning, goes out to work, and pays his rent and taxes on time? They don't come within their thoughts. Now, it's said that in the last year of the previous administration, council rents went up by 6.4%. Correct. But that was then, and that was at a time when inflation was higher than it is now, and it was also before the government introduced the new arrangements for the housing revenue account. This administration, the Labour administration, inherited a very healthy housing revenue account balance from the previous administration. Financially, there is no reason why council rent should be put up by 5.5%. The reason that council rents are being put up by 5.5% is that they are being used to support the administration's council house building programme, which is going to be an important plank of Councillor Ellesmere's parliamentary campaign. And I do not think council tenants should be used as pawns in the political game. I am going to vote against the proposal.
Councillor Mann.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was coming to the Councillor's chamber fully expecting to hear a level of hypocrisy which is quite difficult to stomach, but I wasn't really expecting to hear the amount of completely incoherent self-contradiction that we've had from the Conservatives. Let's be clear about this. Council housing in this town is very significantly cheaper for the tenants than the private sector rented sector. It is significantly cheaper than the housing association sector. It is better maintained than private rented housing or housing association property. It is wildly more popular amongst the tenants than either housing association property or private rented sector property. Council housing in this town is extremely well maintained, is extremely popular, and the previous administration of this borough council tried very hard to get rid of it. Partly because it was a standing advertisement for the benefits and value of publicly delivered service. And clearly what Councillor Carnell is now calling on us to do is to be unsustainable with the rents and to go bankrupt because he wants to see council housing in this town fail. It's an ideological position. It's got nothing to do with any concern for the council house tenants who are extremely happy with the service that is provided, and the more people we've got in council houses getting the good service that is provided by Ipswich Borough Homes, the better.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I look forward to the Liberals and Conservatives voting with us if we ignore the government guidelines on council tax. So at least that will be a quick meeting. Just like with Councillor Carnell, obviously the rate around here is 2.7%. As Councillor Martin says, we provide one of the best housing services in the country. If at least in Suffolk, but far beyond that in the country. Suffolk Coastal has no affordable homes that they own their own housing stock. The people of Ipswich are satisfied with service. Certainly you can't say that about the Greater Anglia. And obviously that's Mr Governor's general election campaign about improving the railways. So he can write his rankings on a Friday about reindeer. So I would think we do our best for
Point of information, can we have some statistics or facts to back up that we've got the best on housing service in the country? What survey is that taken from?
Our satisfaction figures for council post or attend an area housing meeting will be there every week.
How do they compare with other products? That was the question I asked. You're quoting it. I would like to see those comparisons.
Thank you, Councillor Pope. Well, it's not hard to be better than a place like Suffolk Coastal. There's no housing stock. I think you'll find the satisfaction service in Ipswich is very high, and if you can find another council in the local area which is higher, I'd like to see the data. Thank you.
Councillor Morris. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I don't intend to cover everything because I think Councillor Ellesmere and others have covered most of those things. But I do have to wonder what it was like if the Tories who had a group meeting to discuss this and what they were, what they were actually saying with regard to approaching this. Because I just cannot believe for one moment that much of what's been said they really believe. I really do not believe that. We know that nationally there's election fever going on, and it seems to have come as far as Ipswich with a vengeance. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The guideline figure, it's a government guideline figure. We've applied that as most councils across the country who have housing, council housing, will be doing. Some will be higher, some of those councils, and probably most of those councils will be Tory if they've still got some housing. But it is right, it's true. It's a guideline figure. It's a government guideline figure. The government also has another guideline figure, or an aim. They'd like rents to be a different sort of rents, based on the private sector. If we did that in Ipswich, if we did, the rent rise would not be 5.5%, it would be closer to 20 to 25%. So, I just can't see how they can equate that kind of thing with the kind of rubbish we've had today. On the business of investing in new houses, it would seem that the Conservatives on the one hand say, well, we don't really know whether we ought to be publicly saying we support council houses. It seems now that they don't. We know that the Conservative housing spokesman is more in favour of bulldozing houses rather than building houses. But it would seem...
Councillor Mills has once again told an untruth. What I have always said is that there should be a phased redevelopment
We're going to redevelop without
in consultation with local residents, because these properties have a finite lifespan, which is something that Councillor Mills hasn't got the honesty to admit and discuss with his colleagues and with tenants. Instead, they have to live in substandard accommodation that does not even fit in.
And finally, Mr. Mayor, the point I wanted to make is that this is not like it used to be before 2012. We are now, it's a self-financing business plan. Councillor Stewart referred to what sort of confidence could you have in business if you can apply the plan. This is a business plan agreed by this whole council 2 years ago, and as I said, was revisited again last year. Anything we did this year would affect that plan. It would be an absolute nonsense. We'd be storing up trouble quite unnecessarily if we didn't go along with this at this particular time. The only other thing I just wanted to mention, which I can't remember who mentioned it, but somebody suggested that I, Councillor Carr, of course it was, who said that I didn't care about any of this because 2/3 of people get housing done. I said no such thing. I do.
All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Item 11. Licensing Act 2003, determination of draft statement of licensing policy. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Licensing Act requires the licensing authority to adopt a licensing policy statement. And Council have been asked to approve the latest version this evening as amended, and you should all have a copy of the amendment circulating to you. The main difference of the new version is the inclusion of a cumulative impact policy. If no cumulative impact policy is in place, as at present, there is a presumption that licensing applications will be accepted. With the cumulative impact policy, there is a presumption of refusal, which gives the Council a little bit of extra power in setting the standard of the evening economy. The main reason for this move is to help tackle alcohol-related antisocial behaviour, and there's two main sources of that: the street drinking community and also the pubs and clubs of the nighttime economy. And you will see in Appendix 1 that the graphs there will demonstrate the peaks caused by the street drinking community in the afternoon, and then in the evening by the nighttime economy. And again, that's biased towards Friday and Saturday nights when people are out drinking, most people having a good time, some people committing antisocial behaviour. You'll see that on page 97. On pages 98 and 99, they show the locations where the incidents are occurring. You'll see that in black and white there, of course. If you look at the amended papers, you will see there's a colour version of the incident location, and that is much easier to follow. I hope you can all see that. The draft went out to, this is there. The information of where the incidents were, we usually define the extent of the cumulative impact policy. And a key plank of the legislation is that you have to be able to prove that it is a reason to have a cumulative impact policy. You can't just define it everywhere, and you can't define it to the extent of the power. The draft has been to consultation. Again, information on that is in the other appendices. I would like to draw your attention to page 109, because the police are very much in favour of this, and we work closely with the police, but they do say the view of the Constabulary is that the introduction of a cumulative impact policy within Ipswich is essential and will minimise the potential increased levels of violence currently seen by the extension of licensing out. So we have their wholehearted support. I would like to stress that the cumulative impact policy will not affect existing licensees until we apply for a variation for their license. Each application is taken on an individual basis, on its individual merits, and will be decided by a licensing panel of 3 councils. I would also like to emphasise that the Borough Council welcomes well-run and responsible licensees to the council. So the reason for the amendment is that after reviewing the consultation responses with a few amendments, I would just like to run through those with you so you're clear on what's changing. And amendment number 1 is to delete some out-of-date information about the town and just bring it up to date about what Ipswich is. Item 2 is dates. Item 3 is the renaming of the CDRP to the Ipswich Community Safety Partnership. Changes 4, 5 and 6 are to remove any reference to the late night levy and the early morning restriction order, which are 2 other powers which were mentioned in the draft. They are not part of council policy. The council is not considering introducing either of those 2 powers, and I believe it is better not to have any mention of it at all at this time. And the 7th amendment there is to define the extent of the cumulative impact policy. It is perhaps easier to see because in the picture does tell 1,000 words in this. So just to summarise, Mr. Mayor, the Council is very keen to promote a safe as well as a vibrant nighttime economy. We already have an extensive CCTV network. A police sergeant now comes into the control room on a Friday and Saturday night to direct the police officers on the ground. We have taxi marshalling, we're supporting taxi marshalling, we're supporting the street pastors. We are driving the best on land to provide good practice for pubs and pubs in town. And we are very vigorous in our prosecution of premises reviews for people who step out of time. I'd just like to move the amendment to the
Councillor Kirby, second.
Thank you, Chair. I fully second the reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Vicker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you'll see from page 67, this was originally going to be adopted at our council meeting on the 11th of December last year. So I wonder why it is that we've only had these amendments given us tonight when we arrived to commence this meeting. I think a lot more notice could have been given on these amendments, and I am pleased to see some of them that have taken place. Whilst we agree with the majority of the statements of licensing policy, there are some questions we have to ask, although we will be back in the statement tonight. Any measures which promote Ipswich as a safer and pleasant place to work and live are some of the foremost things in our areas of wanting to support. With regard to the community impact policy, I don't feel it's a case of using a sledgehammer to break a nut. Is quite what's needed. And if implemented properly, I would have thought the existing powers that the council already have are adequate. The need for such a policy has to be proved, and it shouldn't just be used for restricting new businesses coming to the town. I've always felt the area to be covered by the cumulative impact policy is too wide and should be concentrated around the two or the most problematic areas in the town, the town centre and the waterfront areas. The map which we originally had in here was absolutely absurd, with long tentacles stretching out to include Woodbridge Road, Spring Road, Vauxhall Road, Felixstowe Road and Acton Road. And in the northwest, the whole of White House and Westgate wards. And it just looked like a giant squid had landed on Ipswich. I'm pleased to see that the tentacles of the squid have now been removed from the map. I don't think they should have been on there in the first place, but I still question why White House and Westgate ward completely are part of the equation on that. The other things I was going to mention have all been withdrawn. It seems to me as though the guts of the policy has suddenly disappeared from view, but no doubt we'll get the opportunity for me to ask those questions that I was going to ask tonight when it comes up at the licensing committee. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this paper we clearly discussed and gone through a lot at the licensing committee, and what has been interesting that where we were sort of told that all this paper here could wait in the previous council meeting was cancelled. Actually, in the meantime, we've had a whole string of licensed establishment coming to extend their hours before this deadline. So, you know, if we had had it in when the date should have been for the council meeting, then, you know, we could already have been using this impact assessment here. It is always very difficult when you have people coming to licensing committee and want to not have the long hours because, you know, anything going on in the neighbourhood has to be connected to the place that are applying for the licensing agreement, and that is not always easy to pinpoint precisely where trouble in our streets come from. I personally hope, and I'm sure that looking at the map, that it will be an area where we need to keep an eye on, because of course we need to keep an eye on as a committee if we suddenly get a string of applications just on the other side of the black
line here. So I'm sure it won't be the last time we'll be having this coming to full council and having to review it. But I hope it'll be good for Ipswich, because we need to be really sure that our young people are as safe as at all possible, and also older ones, should we want going to town on the night. Because I actually think our town centre is more or less as safe as we can get it. And that's what I say to residents if they ask me and make comments about that it's probably unsafe. I actually think if we have a town centre where there's lots of alcohol about, there will always be some problems. But I think it is as safe as we can get it. And certainly nowadays, when the what do they call it? The wardens that stand outside the establishment, they're now outside and not inside, and they can look up and down the streets. I do feel that our town centre is quite safe, and we have to support this.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. Just a small comment about Westgate Ward. Westgate Ward being included there. This actually wanted quite a large area, a much bigger area than this originally. But if you look at the map, there are a lot of outlets selling alcohol, a lot of small licenses, and that has been, that's something we do need to watch. And also, in Westgate, we have until relatively recently a police dispersal area where police have the power to move people on out of that area near the park on Red Bush and Road, and to remove alcohol from them were they using that. And there's been a lot of concern by residents for a long time about that. The dispersal area has worked well, and I think this will give police and local people a bit of confidence in what's happening with regard to that. I think the other thing we need to note is that, as we know, town centres are changing. We've got less retail and more leisure uses, coffee shops and cafes and restaurants, but also bars and pubs and clubs. But we also have more residential, and we're not starting from scratch here. We're trying to integrate different uses into the same space, and I think the balance between supporting late night businesses and their viability and residential is particularly tricky, and members of the licensing committee will know that, and we're going to get more of that managing and balancing between residential and late night uses. And I think the CIP is one tool among several that helps us better manage those potentially conflicting town centre uses.
Anyone else? Councillor Kirby.
Hello, sir. I'll try not to duplicate quickly. I was talking about just, first of all, thank all those who helped put this together, because it was a team effort from all concerned, and there were several meetings, and it also be everything, but I think we've got the gist of it now. One slightly different thing I would mention, though, is that this human impact policy doesn't change what the police can do, or what members of Parliament can do, or what even councillors can do if they wish to object to particular applications. But one change has occurred, which is that the council itself is now defined as a responsible authority, and we can in our own right, rather than getting one of our departments like the environmental we can now, in fact, review a licence we choose to, and it would enable us, in particular, to deal with what are normally the most difficult premises, which are those new ones being set up by people who haven't been in the trade long, but don't know the town, and don't know the rules that we're trying to enforce. And I do feel that it will give us, as hard-working hearing councillors, because that's where the work's all done in the hearings, the opportunity to produce what the public really want, rather than what necessarily the law makes easy for us. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to pick up on a few points that were made.
during the meeting. Westgate Ward, Councillor Jones has already spoken about that, although I would say I did speak to the community police officer there only last week, who is very much in favour of tougher action against mainly the off licences in that area, and there's a lot of trouble with drinking in that area. In terms of the area, the committee who drew up the original, the subcommittee, which was cross-party subcommittee, and I did attend the first meeting, were concerned about displacement of activity where pubs and clubs or off licences who were in the town centre would then just move further out of town and be able to get permission, and we wanted to stop that happening. Clearly we think the existing powers are not sufficient. We would like to toughen them up, and certainly speaking to the PCSO last week has reinforced my view that we need a bit more. And finally on the timescale as well, I just take my timescale from Eric Pickles. I'd like to move this in motion, please.
All those in favour?
The amended motion.
Thank you, that's carried. Agenda item 12, Treasury Management Performance. The report, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I report twice a year to Council on Treasury Management Performance. This report covers the half year from 1st of April to 13th of September 2013, and that follows on from the full year report that I presented in June. Firstly, I'd like to refer councillors to the good news in Appendix A, which shows that the Council continued to pay down its debt. During the 6 months, our existing debts were reduced by 1.776 million, whilst no new loans were taken out. The vast majority of the Council's remaining loans can be traced back to the debt for subsidy swap that the Council made in respect of the Housing Revenue account 2 years ago. The most significant event during the 6-month period covered by the report was Moody's downgrading of the Co-op Bank to junk status. In response, we suspended the use of the Council's instant access account with the Co-op with effect from the 13th of May, managed down our balances in the current account that we have with them to the lowest levels possible. The Council's contract with the Co-op Bank ends on the 31st of March, and during the autumn we participated in a joint procurement exercise with St Edmundsbury, Forest Heath and Baber councils to appoint a new supplier. Coincidentally, Mr Mayor, on the 5th of November, the Co-op Bank announced that it was withdrawing from the local government market in any case. The tender exercise recently concluded, Mr Mayor, was won by Lloyds Bank. We're now in the process of setting up new current account facilities with them, and they are expected to be operational by the 1st of March, at least 1 month before the start of the contract. Last but not least, Mr Mayor, about Iceland, and before Councillor Carnell jumps to his feet once again and tries to convince us what good investments these were, I would just like to remind him that it's now more than 5 years since the banks concerned collapsed, and although we have received some money back, we still have a quarter of all of our fixed-term cash deposits frozen in Iceland, not accessible to us. Although we do expect to get most of our money back in the end, this is by no means certain. We don't know when that end will be, and every year that goes by sees our lost interest rack up further. So, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation of 10.1 that the Treasury Management operations for the 1st of April 2013 to 31st of March 2013 be noted. 30 September 2013 be noted.
Councillor, first again, right?
Yes, second report and the certain rights.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do welcome this report, and I've only really got 2 comments to make. One is, I welcome the fact that the Co-op Bank is no longer going to be the Council of Bankers. I'm also pleased that now the cooperative group is no longer a majority shareholder in the bank. No doubt the quality of service and reliability and security of the bank will improve. So I'm delighted that the Court Bank has been moved from the Council's investment list, and delighted that Lloyds Bank will be taking over. I'm sure there'll be a great improvement with that. My second point, as Councillor Cook says, because I can't resist it, is just to say on the Icelandic Bank's point, the position that I constantly repeat is that in the Labour manifesto for 2011, there was a statement that we'd lost £1.5 million by the investments in the Icelandic banks. That is clearly going to prove to be completely untrue. Another example of the Labour Party deliberately misleading the public, because what's clear from Councillor Cook's report here is that Heritable Bank have paid back 94% of the loan, and we might get more, and it's stated in here that you think Landsbanking will repay the lot. So the point I want to make is that the position has been nothing like as bad as was stated categorically by the Labour Party in its manifesto in 2011. Like every other Labour Party manifesto, a complete work of fiction.
Anyone else wants to comment on this? No?
I'll be brief, Mr. Mayor. I can only assume, given that at this point in time we're still £1.9 million out of pocket on Iceland, plus the interest, which is ramping up year on year, that Councillor Carnell has been consulting with the clairvoyants in his group when it comes to predicting the future. I'd like to move the recommendation.
All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Agenda item 13. Consider the report of the Electoral Registration Officer on the polling district review. Chief Executive Committee.
I can stand up as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a very rare privilege or punishment. I need to be allowed to speak to you. I think it's the second time in about 4 years of doing this job, and I am speaking as the Electoral Registration Officer, technically, rather than as Chief Executive in this instance, but I will endeavour to keep it relatively brief. So just to summarise, and I'm sure you've all read it, the main points of this report are that this review is something we are required to do by law, and something we have the discretion whether to do. For the avoidance of any doubt, nothing within this process or report makes any changes to any ward boundaries, division boundaries, or parliamentary boundaries. Extensive consultation has been undertaken as part of this process, and particularly the Electoral Services Working Group have been involved throughout. The consultation comments that have been received are set out in some detail in Appendix 2. The changes suggested to polling district names, places and boundaries are listed in Appendix 1, and effectively those are matters for Council to agree or otherwise tonight, and the recommendations relate to that. The report also makes some suggestions for me to consider with my third hat on as returning officer in relation to potential polling stations, and puts forward 4 possible alternatives. The election team are currently working on whether those are actually deliverable and achievable, largely associated with whether they can be put for the election day this year. And I can confirm I will confirm the final list of polling stations as I anticipate them for May this year shortly, and I'll make sure the working group gets sight of that. Without wishing to drag it on, I'll put my chief exec hat back on and sit down. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I chaired the working group that dealt with this matter, and I wish to speak in favour of the recommendations, and I hope the Council will adopt them. Just a couple of things to say. First of all, this was a very thorough review in which we resolved quite a number of anomalies that had slipped over from the old process, where the registered laws agree with the boundaries that have been set. But our main concern was to make sure that voters had a convenient place to go to vote, and that we drew boundaries which enabled them to go to the nearest polling station where we could find a convenient place for that polling station. It isn't always easy to do so. Schools are more reluctant these days to provide space on the days of the election for very understandable reasons, but I do wish that they would, because it is part of the citizenship and the training in citizenship of youngsters at school to recognise how the democratic process takes place. I'd also like to thank the very thorough work that we had from the electoral registration team, from the electoral registration officer himself, right down to all of the people who actually did all the work, if I may say so, and to thank the members of the working group, because we spent a good time poring over quite complicated plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the point Councillor Knowles is making about citizenship, and now that the anomalies that Councillor Knowles has referred to have been sorted out, I'm happy to second and reserve the right to speak.
Anyone else? Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just thank the committee for taking on board my comments about the OA and AB confusion that had arisen a couple of years ago. I just wanted to check that Chelsea Close is actually included. I don't see it in the list here, but I think I'm right in saying that they were already in OA. But if they do appear on OB, could we please get them put onto OA as well?
Thanks for that. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to draw attention to the recommendation for my own ward, Gipping, which is that the returning officer is asked to consider the Ramada Hotel for the polling station of the polling district PC. The whole balance of that particular polling district has changed now with the development of the compare site, and I think whereas before that development the existing polling station was probably in the right place, now I think the polling station does need to move, and I would urge the returning officer to do that. I do remember back in the good old days before Randy Road was in Gipping, it was in the Old Town Ward, and long before the compare development, there was actually a single polling station just for Randy Road, which was at Randy Primary School. I do remember, I think possibly the last year that happened, there were only about 100 electors in that road, and 2 of them went along to the polling station that day. It was quite a long and boring day for the returning officers there. But I think the situation has changed now. I would urge the returning officer to do all they can to get the polling station into the Ramada Hotel.
Anyone else? All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried. Item 14, list of changes to members of committee, working groups, service panel representative, and outside bodies. Alienation. Now, that concludes the business for the meeting. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your contribution.